My watch says 6 o'clock.
Good. We good.
Call this meeting to order. This is the Tuesday, July 20th, 2020 Livingston Parish Ordinance Committee meeting. I'm barely breathing this mask. Would you please call the roll, please?
Thank you, Billy.
Mr. Mack, Mr. King,
Here.
Mr. Talbert,
Here.
Mr.
I'll
Garland.
scoot you
Here.
over 6
We got a
feet.
social distance. I can't, this man's killing me.
I agree.
I didn't bring my good one. I'm stuck with that paper.
You plenty fine.
All right. Item 3, review, discussion, and recommendations of ordinances. New business. Item A, discussion, Chapter 125, Article 2, Section 125-49, mobile home park definitions.
I think we got somebody who'd like to speak.
Does someone want to speak on that? Yep.
Come on up and introduce yourself.
My name is Candy Forbes. I live, name and address 37555 Louisiana Highway 16 in Councilman Gary Talbert's district. I just wanted to say that I am not in favor of making any changes to the ordinance that we have on the books right now addressing 911 addresses. And I would like to see the council, since you do already have plans in place to work towards a master plan next year. I believe the master plan's already been passed, is that correct?
Master plan, that we adopted master plan,
Adopted.
you're talking specifically for zoning?
For zoning,
Okay.
yes. I believe that y'all have plans in place to address that moving forward.
Well, we're most definitely gonna address
Yeah,
that moving forward.
and I feel like that would be the time to address it whenever people, right now we're in the middle of COVID, and I feel like right now people aren't really paying attention
Agreed.
to what's going on,
Mhm.
and that we would do better to do it at that time, whenever people have more of a voice in it.
Get better input.
Yeah,
Yeah.
get better input
Mhm.
into it.
I agree.
The ordinance that's on the books right now, I mean, if any of y'all have any questions, I'll be, happy to answer them, but the ordinance we have on the books right now, permitting has a very, very strict process that they go through in order to permit manufactured homes on family land. If it's a lineal descendant, the parent, and if say the child wants to move a home onto family property, the father and the child have to go to the permit office. They have to provide birth certificates to prove that they are related to one another. They have to sign an affidavit saying that the home is not rented and that the child is going to live in that, or parent is going to live in that home. Beyond that, once they do get moved into the house, the assessor's office keeps track of where they all are at, where on family land. And these people file homestead exemption. So you've got homesteads set up on every single one of the manufactured homes that are on family land right now, regardless of whether or not they own the property. So I feel like that's a pretty stringent process. They also pay a higher permitting fee right now than you would if you were just gonna put a mobile home on a piece of property. They have to meet all the requirements for sewer, and all of the same permitting requirements for electrical or plumbing than anyone else would. So, my hope is that there's a lot of work that went into that particular ordinance, and I know that none of you guys were here at that particular time, but it's my hope that we could just try to get a little more information on it to you guys before you move forward and make a decision.
Okay. I like that.
I mean, I'd like to see how zoning would address that directly.
Yeah, me too. I think it's
And-
important
Honestly, I still think 4
as much, yeah.
is a lot. I think 4 is a lot.
It does sound like a lot. I agree with you. When you think about it, it sounds like a lot. But you have to consider how large some of these tracts of land actually are. You're driving down the road and you see 3 or 4 manufactured homes that are sitting on the side of a state highway. It's impossible with the naked eye to tell whether or not those homes are sitting on individual pieces of property that have individual legal descriptions.
Mhm.
4 half-acre lots, or if they're sitting on 1 2-acre lot that belongs to dad. It's impossible to tell. aesthetically, it looks no different, from what you see, I feel like what I saw was, I know that you guys had an issue come up with family partitions, and you worked to try to address that and stop some of the abuses that were there. And I don't know a lot about family partitions, so I'm not gonna get into that, but I feel like the conversation just sort of segued into 911 addresses, and they're two completely different things. One involves the actual legal subdividing of property into separate legal descriptions. One involves leaving a piece of land intact, one legal description, and putting 911 addresses, I say not putting manufactured homes on there for children or lineal descendants. Now, if you had someone who was, let's just use an example. The family partition that originally had caused some issues, I believe it was somebody trying to divide up like 20, 25 lots, is that correct?
Yeah, on a private drive.
Okay.
road. Yeah.
Okay, let's use them as I don't know where it's at, I don't know who it is, it's irrelevant, but let's just use them. I'm just gonna assume, because they were trying to put in so many lots, that this piece of land had to be, what, 9, 10 acres?
It was way more than that.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a big piece.
okay, so let's just assume it was 10 for the sake of argument.
Okay.
If he had been trying to not do a family partition, but actually move manufactured homes on there, he would only been allowed to have his house and 3 extra, regardless of how big that piece of land
Period, yeah.
was. And in his case, he was trying to get 20 individual lots. That creates drainage issues, that creates problems, I get that. We don't.
Yeah, that's what we were trying to head off, is things like
And
that.
I think the two things got conflated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and look, I'm gonna agree, the one thing about it is the 3 additional addresses to the homestead is never gonna create some private servitude that at some point in time in the future, somebody's gonna be calling the parish to maintain. It is a different situation, and that's one of the things we're trying to address in the family partition with the re-subdivision of lots. So, I think Ms. Ford's made some valid points that maybe we, in our discussions of where we were, and then seeing four addresses on one lot, we might have been a little premature. I still think 4 is excessive. I still believe with direct lineal descendants what we need to do, but I'm not gonna go back and, if we're gonna look at this at a later date when we address zoning, then I'm all for leaving it as intact right now. And then when we look at zoning as a whole and we start talking about what you can do on rural and what you can do in other tracts of land, then that can be addressed at that point in time and we can figure it out. So, which will probably make, and part of the reason that this exists is because sometimes your property's mortgaged, other times it's because it's expensive to subdivide something and you're only gonna do it for a short time. And maybe in part of the rural zoning will allow for multiple addresses on tracts of property based on acreage or something, or density, and this won't need to apply at that point in time. But I think given where we've learned today, and the conversation that Ms. Ford had with me after the meeting and a couple other times since then, I'm good with backing up on not addressing this at this point in time, as long as we plan on taking it up, after the first year when we start addressing zoning. And that's just, that's kind of how I feel, is, I don't know.
And
That's, go ahead.
the only thing that I'd like to say is that, the one thing that I don't want people to think is that you can just do this anywhere, because you can't. The individual municipalities have their own zoning rules. Denham does, Livingston does, Walker does, and beyond that, so you have to be out in a rural area, beyond that, just basic economics and free enterprise dictates it, because no one is going to move 4 manufactured homes next door on a piece of property next door to Juban Crossing, because the land is worth too much. You just don't see that. So I think that I think that there's a lot of rules in place right now that help set them apart. I don't want there to be an argument where that you think that manufactured homes are going to end up in a place that you don't necessarily want them,
Sure.
because it just doesn't happen that way with just free enterprise and just basic economics.
Well,
It
with
doesn't
me,
happen.
it isn't about the manufactured homes. I mean, if that's what people can afford to do, that's fine. I don't mind that. We were just working so hard to try and stop many trailer parks from popping up. So we changed the trailer park ordinance to make it easier for the people to build trailer parks, keep them all in one place. And several other things that we worked on, getting rid of family petitions, making it go under the minor resub ordinance. And then all of a sudden, this just came to light, and we were like, oh man, that's gonna circumvent everything we've been trying to do, and it doesn't. It's something that can be addressed in densities and all, like Gary said, in the future when we look at zoning.
And
we
density, that'll
appreciate
be a
this.
huge difference whenever they do have some type of density requirements. And I don't want you to think at all that I'm anti-zoning. I am not, I'm truly am not. Density requirements, I think, will be very, very helpful going forward in the future, because the parish, there's a lot of differences between Denham Springs and, Killian,
Don't we know?
North of
Yeah.
Holden. Yeah.
But that's all that I had to say. Thank y'all for
All
allowing
right,
me.
so
Thank
it's
you.
a
Thank you, Ms. Ward.
recommendation that we just.
I think we'll just table this item and we'll pick it up at a later date when we address zoning and density, then we ought to be able to come back and revisit
Okay.
this particular item, because if we're gonna define a piece of property as rural and then put some density requirement, then it's kind of, then we can come back and
Takes
address
care of
this at
itself,
that point in time.
Okay.
We don't need to do any votes or anything on that, just table
We just tabled.
it. Okay.
Did you have
I'd really
something?
be glad when we can get down into zoning and start discussing that a lot more.
What's gonna happen?
Man, the old
Any
man
other
spent-
discussion on this?
Okay.
Tabled. All right, so discussion of chapter 22, environment, article 2, noise. I guess this has to do with the noise ordinance. Now, to be clear, and for my sake, I should say, in the city of Walker, which is where I live, we don't really, we have our own ordinance for that, and it's handled pretty well, so. I don't really get, knowing that the architecture of my district is mostly the city limits of Walker, some outside of that. I don't really get it. I've never actually had one noise, nobody bring anything to me on this. But someone wanted to put it on the agenda, so I'll allow that to happen. Do we have someone here that want to speak on this? Come on.
Good evening. My name
State
is
your name and address for the record.
Emily and Timothy Decker, 21675 Walker South Road, and that is a Denham address.
Okay.
Okay. So our goal here is to have everyone on the same page when it comes to the noise ordinance, to alleviate confusion. And if you look at section 2221, it talks about land use. Noise is measured by a decibel reading. It even states how to properly use a decibel meter. The decibel reading is very black and white. You're either above it or below it. There is no room for interpretation based on one's ability to hear. The confusion sets in with section 2222, A and B, specific prohibitions. According to the parish attorney, Mr. Moody, and he is also agreed by Major Thomason, that they think this 50-foot provision is more for moving cars and remote broadcasting. With the way that this specific prohibition reads, anyone that can hear music at 50 feet can get a summons to go to court. This prohibition is too ambiguous, and I'm talking about B at this time. It depends on too many variables, including the officer's perception of the situation, one's ability to hear, time of day, quality of structure and windows, and other environmental noises in the area. Plenty of noises can be heard in someone's house, including road noise, construction, wildlife, etc. And an example of our personal property, sitting on our front porch, the road noise from traffic on Highway 447 is about 70 decibels at 190 feet. Sitting on our back porch, the road noise of Highway 447 is about 60 decibels. When we are inside our house, we can hear the road noise. I understand that road noise is not a sound amplifying device. It is just to put into perspective decibel readings and what you can hear inside your house. Other examples, normal conversation is 60 decibels at 1 meter. Vacuum is 75 decibels, excuse me, Busy restaurants average 85 decibels, and quiet offices average 40 decibels. If the specific prohibition section is indeed for remote broadcasting and moving vehicles where a constant decibel reading cannot be easily measured, as stated by Parish Attorney and Major Thomason, it needs to clearly state this. As it stands now, it leaves too much for interpretation, which causes unneeded and undesirable stress between officers who are doing their best to enforce the ordinance and the citizens of the community who must abide by it. I have a copy of the Ascension Parish decibel, their noise ordinance, and it goes specifically off decibel readings, if you guys would like that.
Okay, yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
I think we can make, I'd like to make a recommendation right off the bat that I think would solve some of this. I think if we go to 22-22A and 22-22B and remove or private from both of them, then I think that it'll solve the immediate problem that you're being impacted by, because if there's a decimal reading at her property line or the other person's house, then that should be adequate. That, you know, to say that within 50 feet of her house that there's noise, that she's subject to a summons, I think is a violation of her rights as a, you know, citizen, because, you know, she could be in the middle of 50 acres, but that still technically, if you can be heard within 50 foot of the item generating the noise, even on private property, subjects you to a violation, I think that that's unreasonable. So I think we need to strike or private from both of them, and then it's based on a public roadway or public property. That would stop somebody from playing a boombox in a public park, or, you know, a loud vehicle driving down a public road, you know, or even a parking lot is considered public. You know what I'm talking about? So that could be, you could address those. Look, I got them pull up at my truck stop all the time. I'm in the office, all of a sudden my office starts vibrating, I'm out the door because I work in there, you know, I'm looking for the car. So I understand, you know, the noise concerns. However, I think that if we eliminate or private from both of those, it'll address the specific issue you have, and I think it'll go a long way toward clarifying. And then we can come back and look at if we want to put some specific decibel reading, but I think by eliminating or private on 22-22A and B, I think it eliminates I think it takes care of your particular concern you have.
Yes, sir.
And I think that it'll go back to that, you know, if you're on private property, we're gonna read at one point, and on public land, you know, it's a different type situation.
This is the Ascension Parish.
Yes,
You guys
Yeah,
want-
can you-
make a copy of
We're
those.
gonna introduce that in the record and get some copies for everybody.
Does that sound good to y'all?
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
do you need to read it just to make sure, or, 'cause I'll give you a second.
I have it right here.
Cause I'm gonna read it right now and see if what Gary's saying is true.
Actually,
That
what's
actually
happening,
fixes it.
clarify me if I'm wrong, you've got a neighbor calling on you, and
Yes, sir.
and a new deputy is basically interpreting that they can hear the sound within 50 feet of where it's coming out, which is well inside their property, it's not at the property line.
Right.
So we need to eliminate the private property part of the sound within 50 feet.
Yeah, I've had that issue before myself.
Well, I'm just saying.
Well, we had multiple officers tell us that we were well within the noise ordinance, and then the one said, no, based on these two things, you're not. And so, you know,
Yeah.
then it creates kind of a stressful situation where the
Right.
officer's trying to play between two people that are citing two different things. If it's very cut and dry, it's this many decibels at the property line between these hours of the day and night, then
And if you break that, then you know you
then
gotta,
you know you're
Absolutely.
wrong. Correct.
Right, so
No problem.
I think by eliminating or private from that, we solve that issue, that thing goes away, and then we can come back and look at how we wanna measure decibels on a specific item. But it addresses the public park situation where people could impose their music on somebody else, and so I think we still leave that in place.
yeah,
It just eliminates the private property situation.
yeah, I had the issue with a bar in my district. They had a bunch of, an older subdivision with a lot of older people in it, and they were playing loud music outside at like midnight. And, they're no longer in business, wasn't my doing, but they're no longer in business. But they were the sheriff was getting called every Friday and Saturday night.
And so we get up early, we don't play our music, this is literally during the day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
so-
we live on Highway 447, and traffic is tremendous on that road, and we deal with a good bit of traffic
is.
noise. So simply to overcome the
You gotta turn
traffic,
it
up.
traffic noise with the
You gotta turn
radio puts it beyond the 50-foot mark
My
anyway.
neighbors be yelling at me, I've been playing it loud out by the pool, so, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think 50 foot's kind of ridiculous,
My
but,
girls play it outside on the
You
back
sound like
porch.
Joe
and-
Kwiatkowski.
huh?
I sit at night, at like, usually 11 or 12, I'll text, turn it down. Yeah, you just don't wanna be that.
I hear you.
But I mean,
Yeah,
well, and this is a good example of just even like ordinances over time need adjustment.
they do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're not necessarily,
Well, there's a means now.
well,
they-
and there's not necessarily
equipment works
anything
well.
wrong with the ordinance when it was put out. It was good, they just become outdated, and this one right here,
It talks about using a phonograph.
that's what I was
It's
gonna
very-
say.
it's very recommended.
That was the example.
have
I mean, look,
Still
if you got,
1957.
if you got a phonograph, you should be able to play it as loud as you want.
You said vinyl should be
Yeah, I'm just saying,
Vinyl's
if you got vinyl, well, and here's what, there are things I do know.
Because there's all the music on vinyl was good.
Yeah, it is. And you're not gonna get a lot of bass out of vinyl. And the bass is what travels. You know, people, you know, and you know this because you're sitting, look, I used to be that guy,
I feel it.
you know?
I'm still that guy.
You can hear them, you know, maybe, but I'm driving down the road, it's my own business, so.
Yeah, that's right.
But, you know, you can hear the bass coming way before you can hear the music.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and that's because it's what travels. And the difference between a lot of people don't know, as far as decibel ratings, the difference between 40 and 50 isn't the same as the difference between 50 and 60. That you got 10 decibels, but decibel, as you increase it, it increases exponentially. So.
We have some examples
Yes.
for standard decibel readings if you.
What is it?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah, go
I read it, I'm sorry. It was, a normal conversation is 60 decibels, a vacuum is 75, a busy restaurant is 85 decibels.
So, yeah, so you're talking, when you talk about.
I got a Kirby back, mine's 150 decibels, sounds like a plane taking off.
But, you know, you look at my old car used to be like 130.
Mhm.
It was way louder than a restaurant or conversation.
Or a rock
You know,
concert.
Yeah. it's
We've
just
never
very-
had a reading over 65 at the property
At the
line
property
that I'm
line.
aware of.
Yeah, okay.
Which is a normal conversation at the property
Well,
line.
I think what we're gonna do is, we're
I
gonna,
think we get
this
the-
immediate change here,
Okay.
that will suffice for y'all at the,
Yes.
Yes,
and then we'll
sir.
take a look at what they have going,
Please.
and,
Yeah,
and
then
we
we
might
tweak.
adjust it further down the road, so.
So I'd like to make a recommendation that we send to the council, removing those 2 words, or those 4 words.
Okay.
I'll say.
Second. Motion by Mr. Talbot, second by Mr. King. Any further discussion from the audience?
I think that takes care of y'all.
That's
Thank
a-
you.
okay.
Thank y'all very much.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
So declared.
Yeah, but
Yeah. All right. Item C, discussion of chapter 125, section 125-30, drainage districts.
is that in here?
Yeah, that's at the bottom of that page.
Yeah, but I'm gonna paper.
25, flip your paper back.
These are the more
Right at the
striking.
bottom.
Oh. Yep, I'll bring glasses.
All right, so it says 125-30. I guess for everybody's, we'll read the whole thing. In areas of development which lie all or in part within a recognized drainage district, complete drainage impact studies, when required, shall be submitted to the applicable drainage district in accordance with section 125-9 of this chapter. Any comments must be directed to the ODS, this project engineer, and the review engineer for consideration. And we're striking, however, the review engineer will make the final recommendation to the planning director. Good?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the, what we don't want to be able is the parish engineer supersede the authority of the gravity drainage district engineer. So it
Gotcha.
only applies to gravity drainage districts.
And it only really applies to 1, 2, and 5.
Yeah, well, funded gravity drainage
Yeah,
districts,
that's
yeah,
it.
right. Because the other ones don't have engineers to review anything.
Yeah, okay, and then then you have item B, which is all costs incurred by the drainage district in the course of the review of any construction development shall be borne by We're striking drainage district ODS.
I think we just need to strike all
Oh,
of
striking
them. We
drainage
did-
district. We're not striking ODS.
Right, we're striking drainage district and adding ODS. It needs to be the developer, it needs to be the developer's responsibility.
Yeah,
That's
they're
what-
building it, they pay for it.
Right.
Yeah, right now it's
Yeah,
being borne by the drainage district.
Been
Yeah.
borne by the taxpayers within the drainage district.
That's right.
Yeah.
To review future development,
mean-
which is wrong.
in which case they're gonna be, the people in the drainage district are gonna have it, be responsible for it from there going forward. They shouldn't be responsible for the initial,
Hey.
part of the initial development.
Right.
I agree. Item C, we're gonna strike all of this?
No, we're adding
We're
all
adding this? Okay, that's right. All fees shall be paid prior to release of approved documents, and proof of payment shall be received before final approval of the planning department.
Which is the same wording related to the parish review engineer with respect to their review of the, whole site development plan. So it's just copying that verbatim and making it applicable to the drainage district's engineer's bill.
Yep. Well, I'm good with all this.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept those changes.
Motion by
I'll
Mr.
second
Talbot,
that.
second by Mr. King. Any further discussion? Any discussion from the audience? All right. So order. All right. Item 4, review, discussion, recommendations of ordinances, old business. We have anything to discuss on anything old we've done?
So,
I'm good.
I think we finished everything we were working on. We put in a lot,
Yeah,
a lot of work.
I agree.
Thank you, Lauren.
All right, all right then. Any discussion from the audience on anything we've discussed prior to today?
I'm good, I don't have anything.
All right, we don't, any other business? We have anything you want to bring up for?
The next time,
Yeah.
we talked about several things, but I think they were all pertaining about the same thing.
This is the problem with having a meeting every week. You talk about so much stuff, you forget a lot of the stuff you
Well,
talk
we have
about.
2 more meetings before the next council meeting, we may,
Yeah,
the master plan review needs to take one of those nights.
yeah.
Did you talk to Mr. Gerald?
I did not. He called me, but
I talked to him yesterday and I didn't even
We
think about it.
don't really have anything that we need to address before the next planning,
Yeah.
the next council meeting. We've addressed everything on the agenda this.
Do they have
Yes.
one scheduled for?
it's probably the second.
It's on the calendar?
2 Tuesdays from now.
2 Tuesdays from now, so we'll have one next week. I'm
Okay.
sure
Well, if we have
sometime in the
something-
next
if we
7,
have something-
in the 6 days, we will have something to discuss in the
Yeah,
next
and if we
meeting.
do, we'll come.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have a laundry list of stuff to work on from like planning
Yeah.
recommendations, just nothing that y'all already brought.
When is it?
Okay.
Yeah, that's
it.
2.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know we have things we can add during there. I was just trying to, we certainly will have something to discuss. I was
next-
just trying to give a
I will not
preview
be
for
here
people.
next week because my daughter is being induced that afternoon for my first grandbaby. So I'm gonna be in Metairie at her house because you can't go to the hospital.
how do I have a grandkid before you? How does that work?
Well, I ain't even gonna go there, but, cause mine's 31 and she's just now getting around to it.
Huh?
So
Alrighty,
I won't be
that's
here
it.
that meeting.
All right, motion to adjourn?
Scooter makes that motion, I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. King, second by Mr. Tower.
Aye.
All in favor, say aye. All
All
right,
right.
adjourn.
Well,